go ahead and call this meeting of the Intergovernmental Committee to order. We're going to go ahead and start with introductions, and I'll go first, and we'll go to Kara and then around the circle. Zooming in on me. I'm Leila Lowry, and I'm the chair of this team. Kara?
I'm Kara Bashon, I'm the executive assistant.
I'm Roseanne Cowell, I'm the board manager.
Courtney Westling, director of government relations.
Terry is amazing. Is this you doing this, or is it Kara?
It's telepathic.
Or is it a smart camera?
Just it follows the voices.
Very cool.
So it works sometimes. Be staring off out the window at birds.
I am Herman Green, member on the board of this committee.
Liz, we're going around and doing introductions, and it's your turn.
Excellent, I sat in the right seat then, I should have sat over there. Hi, I'm Liz Large, I'm the district's contractor general counsel. I apologize for being a few minutes late.
I'm Dana White. I'm the director for planning and real estate for the district.
And hi, I'm Terry Proctor, communications department, just doing the tech for me.
Man behind the curtain, the tech wizard. All right, our first item today is the update on state redistricting. I can say that clearly. Courtney, did you want to brief us on where we are with this?
Yeah, there was a wrench thrown into everything yesterday.
Yeah.
So the state is currently, they have until September 28th to approve new maps for our state legislative districts and congressional districts.
Which is what, Tuesday?
Yeah, Tuesday the 28th. If the legislature does not approve something, it goes into the hands of the state secretary of state. So, which, of course, we have a Democratic secretary of state. So I think what's happening right now, well, should back up. The legislature kind of had to shut down yesterday because there was a COVID case in the Capitol. So they've canceled legislative days, which are supposed to start today and go through Friday, which are interim committee meetings of different various committees, legislative committees. And the work of the redistricting committees and the full Senate and House has also shut down temporarily. It sounds like they're going to gather on Saturday morning to work because they have till Tuesday. The minority Republicans have, raised a lot of concerns about the maps. They think they're gerrymandered, all the usual, the usual stuff. There's been some rumor of walkouts. Nobody's seen anything yet because they've all walked out because of COVID. And so it's all still up in the air. But I sent you guys a memo, or Roseanne had it and sent it out that kind of outlines the process. So I'm not giving any more information than or any addition. This is all stuff you already know, but the new information is that it's all come to a halt because of COVID, which it shouldn't be a surprise, but it's just disappointing that there was a case in the Capitol that froze the work. So that's where we are with redistricting.
Thank you, Westling. I realized I didn't do introductions of the people online. I'm not used to this hybrid world yet. So I know Julia is online and maybe Director Holland, Gary.
Yes, hello. Can you hear me?
Yep.
We can.
All right. I'm actually heading there now. So I'll get in about minutes.
Great. And I know Julia's online, and Don has just joined us. So our meeting keeps growing. All right, Julia, are you speaking to the Rose Quarter project item on the agenda?
I came to support and assist Courtney. So I don't know, Courtney, if you want to cue it up and I can
Knock it out of the park?
Yeah, I'm happy to toss that softball your way. So we wanted to
Just tossed it to you.
I'll toss it back. Man, I haven't played softball in a while. I'm just kidding. So we wanted to provide an update on the I-5 Rose Quarter project, how and the impacts it's had on PPS over time, right? This is not a new issue, but for our newer board members, you may not have some of the background on how we got here. Although the board did pass a resolution back in the summer saying, hey, we still have a lot of concerns about the air quality and the soil stability and all these other things because the Harriet Tubman Middle School is so precariously perched on top of a freeway. And now we're proposing to move the freeway even closer to the school. So for about 2 years, I'm just giving you real high level, quick background, and then I'll give you the current status. So for a couple of years, the board, the PPS board, different variations of it, weighed in with ODOT and with the state transportation commission to say, which oversees ODOT, to say, hey, we have concerns, please talk to us about how you're going to address these concerns. They went mostly unaddressed. The transportation commission chose to move forward with an environmental assessment, which is the less vigorous federal process that looks at impacts to a variety of things. What we had asked for as a district was an EIS, which is an environmental impact statement, which is a more rigorous and robust process that did not go through. So fast forward, the ODOT created a few different subgroups to look into some various committees, including an executive steering committee, which Director Brim Edwards has been sitting on for about a year, the community advisory committee, and then which is our community oversight advisory committee, the COAC, and then the historic Albina advisory board, the HAB. Lots of acronyms. We love acronyms.
I see.
So you're not, there's no quiz on any of this, but.
Thank you.
But what ODOT was attempting to do was address concerns that, this is a neighborhood that has been, hit hard over the years because they built a freeway. We have, destroyed wealth building in this neighborhood in Albina. We, there's just so much historic harm because of this original project, and now you're basically doing more harm. So that was contemplated over and over again and talked about in many rooms, and was really a centerpiece for the conversation about highway covers, which was another group, another acronym, which was the HC3, so Highway Cover Coordinating Committee, which I sat on. Yeah, lots of them. We just can't have enough committees, but it was a good dialogue. And so there was a third party that worked through various stakeholders to talk through what could highway covers look like. And folks like Albina Vision really wanted that, but they wanted it done a certain way. Everybody was trying to figure out the best route possible. Meanwhile, we had a lot of other stakeholders that want to move the project forward because they want jobs for the community. This is, for example, the minority contractors. The truckers really want freight moving quickly, so they want the project moving forward. So there are a lot of players who were at the table with Director Brim Edwards in the executive advisory committee, or executive steering committee, so there are a lot of elements to the project. Jobs, traffic issues, congestion, freight movement through I-5 corridor up through Washington, figuring out how we address historic harms, racial justice, school kids. I mean, it's just like everything. This is going to be a great case study for somebody someday. So where we are now is the executive steering committee moved a hybrid 3 option forward to the Oregon Transportation Commission. The hybrid 3 option, I can't get into the details because quite frankly, I haven't memorized them, but it is a project that would include highway covers, it would add money to the project. So that's an issue, and I'll get to that. And a commitment from the governor and other elected leaders to help figure out how to move or relocate Tubman State. The Oregon Transportation Commission passed that or approved that hybrid 3 model to move forward. So ODOT is moving forward with that model on the condition that they figure out how to pay for it. Because this project has it's basically doubled in cost in the last few years because of underestimating the original cost that the legislature approved, and then adding the highway cover project on top of it, which is going to be a great thing, but it's going to cost more money to do it. So what does this have to do with PPS? I mentioned Tubman a couple times. So we have this school, it's not in a good location. We've been talking about how do we solve this problem. And now there's a commitment to figure out how do we potentially relocate the school, which is not ideal, right? Nobody thinks this is ideal. And so I don't know, Julia, if you want to jump in, I've been doing a lot of the talking.
I think that's great background. As I mentioned the other day at the board meeting, The governor also had convened a very small group of stakeholders that weren't necessarily, there were more community stakeholders, including myself, for a series of meetings on how to work through the issues. And that, as Courtney referenced, they kind of landed on a hybrid 3, which OTC has embraced. And then there was agreement that the school should be in a different location. And so based on that conversation with the governor, a subsequent conversation with Tina Kotek, and conversations with Tobias Reed, the state treasurer, and his staff, we're trying to put together a capital stack that would essentially pay for a rebuild of the school in a different location in Albina. And staff's done a great job. We have an assessment of the appraised value of the building, because theoretically, if the state paid for it to move and be rebuilt, they would then take that property. Obviously, it's part of a larger negotiation, but we have that now, and we're in the process of also getting the governor committed to asking all of the local jurisdictions if they had property within Albina that could be appropriate and the right size for a new location. And I think we've received a partial list, and I don't know if the team there wants to talk about that, or we're not, or that's not ready yet to be gone through. And then the recommendation we've had from both the governor's office and Tina's office, or Tina Kotek is the Speaker of the House, is that we should be looking at the February 2022 legislative session for that, because most likely this will be some sort of lottery bond or something else that will some other vehicle that will require legislative action. So that is the current work stream of working towards what could we bring forward with our partners for the February legislative session, and then also work on those things that don't have to be legislative approved, but that could be part of a larger package.
Okay.
Yeah,
Do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, so
legislature piece?
I don't think we're ready to share the options yet, because we're waiting on ODOT owned property, and so it wouldn't be a full, fully
Wouldn't be a full.
realize the list, but we will be sharing that when we have it. There's a lot of public owns land. It's not all in Albina, and this list doesn't include ODOT, which is a big landowner, so we want to get that full list. So that's coming. The capital stack, is Director Brim Edwards likes to refer to it, and I like that. I like it because it's not going to be one source, right? It's going to be a stack of sources. So we're exploring what that looks like. We don't know the capacity of the lottery bonds. We'll know that later in the year, which is, we'd like to know it yesterday, but we don't know. And that'll give us some sense of what's possible. A lot of times lottery bonds are the most flexible bonds, but they are also, a lot of people like to go after them, like housing advocates, et cetera. So it'll be a competitive source, but depending on the capacity of it, we might be able to get our hands on some of it. I don't mean it to say that we're gonna go like grab it, but just that if there's political will to solve this problem, then we'll work on that source. The other, and then of course the legislative advocacy part, who do we talk to? So we made up a quick kind of timeline of who we should be reaching out to and when. There's obviously leadership in the legislature, but also the legislators that represent that part of the community. So in Albina and that part of Portland, Senator Lou Frederick, Representative Thomas Sanchez. So we have some initial meetings coming up in the next couple of weeks with legislators to bring them up to speed on all of this. It's not a big secret. It's been reported on in the newspaper and for many, many months, but we want to make sure there's a lot going on. So we want to make sure that they have the latest and greatest information. And that also includes Ways and Means Committee members, because obviously this would be a financial ask. Let's see, what else?
So the final thing I'd just say is it would be great if people are interested in being part of conversations heading into the February session to let us know, because everybody has different sets of relationships, and we'd like this to be on a priority, a whole host of legislators' priority list to get done in the February session, and not just those from the Portland area, because the case has been made that I-5 is a sort of statewide transportation priority project, and that it shouldn't just be PPS legislators who should care. I'm sorry, Portland legislators who should care about this. But anyway, if you're interested, let Courtney know, because there will be it's a short session, so it's a sprint, and the more help we can get, the better.
And much of the work for short session happens before session. So
That was my question, Courtney. If this is probably going to be in the February package, just backing up in time, like we probably need to have identified the site and
Soon.
have understand. Yeah. Okay.
because that is the big unknown. That's
Right.
hard to advocate for something when you don't know the something. You know the dollar, but you don't have a site. And we know that this is. It takes time to do all this. It would take time to find a site. And we'll hopefully get something down sooner. You got to find a site. You've got to get the money. You have to find. It takes time to build. What do we do with students now who are there? Because do we have a swing site option? That's all. I'm leaving that to you guys. But there's a lot of things we have to consider when we're talking about a move like this. Of course, community engagement. That's huge.
Right,
There's
right.
so much that goes into it. So it's a sprint in terms of getting all the information in time and getting the locking down the source of funds, but the process is going to take some time, and the construction won't start until 2023 on the project, which may change, right? Because everything else changes with these big transportation projects. But we're watching that closely. We're still in really close contact with ODOT and our partners at the city and the county and metro. I still have regular check-ins with them. So our work isn't done just because the proposed plan has moved forward. The work continues and the same conversations have to happen, and there's a lot to it. We're lucky that we're not the transportation experts and have to keep working through all those issues. We're trying to solve for our piece of it, which is a big issue for us, but they want to see the project move forward and help us. That's kind of where we are.
Which is great. And we can talk offline. I just want to make sure we understand what we have to have and when we have to have it.
Yes.
So that we're not getting ourselves in trouble.
What other questions do people have on this topic? I've got a couple, but Gary or Herman or Julia, I know you live this, but what other questions might you have?
I don't have any at this time. I'm actually excited to be learning a lot more of the in-depth details around what this project is looking like, because it is very loud in the community right now. Very loud.
Gary, did you have anything?
Ditto.
One thing I thought of when you were talking about land, Courtney, you mentioned ODOT, is I'm assuming that it would be a terrible idea to put Tubman on top of the freeway cap. So I think if that gets proposed, we might want to have a plan like that. It doesn't seem like that's the place for a school. I'll trust our facilities people.
How would we do
Well,
open
and
space?
It would
Right.
also take up a lot of space that is not that would be a missed opportunity for business development.
Yes.
Right,
and
if that's the
wealth
intention.
creation. So there's, I think when you're talking about the footprint of that, and I don't know all the numbers of how big the cap would be, but if you add an 8-acre school to the, I don't even think it's 8
That's a lot.
acres, you know what I mean? I don't know how big it is. I have to go back and look at all the notes over time here, but it would take up a big.
It would be, I'm
part of it.
visualizing soccer balls flying off the Wi-Fi.
I think we've really, I think the conversation is this part of justice in lots of ways for our students. Tubman needs to be moved. The other piece, as we look at justice for lots of our students, is climate justice and how, we continue to talk to ODOT about this freeway project and what we know about climate mitigation and pre-OA development. And I know we have a No More Freeways group that's very active in Portland. So continuing to do the work that we've done as a district around climate justice to continue to speak into this.
I think this is a really important point that is the climate activists won't be satisfied if the project moves forward at all, right? So there's a lot of, this is another part of why this is a very tricky project. There are those in the community and the Sunrise Movement and the No More Freeways folks who are saying, no, let's not do this at all. Everybody has their personal opinions about that. As the board, your decision is, or your impact is around the school and how do you engage the students in it, but also how do you make this work for kids?
But I just know, like, with some of our legislators,
Yeah.
like Karin Power,
Yes.
who's an environmental attorney, she may support moving Tubman
Yeah.
and yet not support this
Yes, and
project.
I've had conversations with her and that is very much, I don't want to speak for her, but
No, but that's, yeah.
concerns about that. And
Yeah,
really amazing students testify over time and just testified at the OTC, the 9th or whatever day that was. They're all running together, but really amazing students who took time out of their lunch and were late to class to talk about why this is a bad idea. So I think two things can be true at the same time. And I think that's what we're seeing that in this situation.
And so I think as we partner with this, that we, again, as districts,
Yeah.
maybe don't want to take a pro freeway expansion position. We're pro protecting our kids in Tubman, and we're pro environmental justice for all, and how that looks. Julia, you were going to say something?
yeah, I was gonna say, it was a great question you asked. And because it does demonstrate the complexities, because other partners at the table also have a similar position. So Metro President Lynn Peterson has, several times said this whole deal has to come back to Metro because it doesn't have congestion pricing in it. We're not going to be supportive of the project. I also think it's important to note, if you look back to 2 years ago, I think it was 2 years ago, the board resolution pushing for an EIS very much was aligned with, I think, our position on climate. So our values we've expressed have been, I think, consistent with our climate position. One of the challenges that we're going to have with the location is, because the freeway's impact on Albina generally, if your assumption is the school is going to be built somewhere else in Albina, that you can't necessarily just say, hey, there's another place in Albina that's available that we could put it there. For example, BES, one of the suggestions had been putting at the BESC site. And that's a question, is the air quality better at BESC outside than it is at the Tubman location? How much better or worse? So those are all going to be things that get put in the mix, but why it's also meant it hasn't been like a quick and easy, like this is easy to find a solution for relocating the school, or holding all of our values, racial equity and social justice and climate all at the same time.
Thank you, Julia, for that. Anything else on this topic before we move on? All right, Courtney, houseless impacts on schools. This is, I'm sure many of us are aware that we've had parents contacting news media talking about their concerns about houseless encampments around our schools. I think we also know that we have students who are experiencing houselessness, and so there's an impact in our schools with our own families who are struggling. And so this is a conversation we're having about how do we support houseless folks in Portland and also make sure our students can get to school.
Yep. And I will just let you know that Molly Emmons from Security is going to walk up here right now, because she has been involved in this as well.
Okay, do we want to wait till?
Yeah, why don't we wait just a minute, just
Okay.
so here's the whole story.
Excellent. Well, since you were a little bit late, do you want to introduce yourself? Just say who you are and why you're here.
For maybe the people that are watching that don't know me, because I think everybody knows me, this is Don Wolf, I'm the Chief Technology Officer.
I have to tell you that it took me about a year to remember everyone's name when I first started on the board. So I always find it helpful, even having been around for 2.5 years now, when people introduce themselves, and especially with masks.
Yeah.
Totally fair.
And then like with Dana, I called her Dana because when I see her name, that's what I read. And so it's remembering how to say things properly. So it always helps me out when we do introductions,
Yeah.
even when we know each other.
So it's not Dana?
No, it's Dana.
Dana.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
And if I want to be like I am at my church leadership groups, when we do introductions, I'll have you answer a question as well, like, what kind of pets do you have at home or something like that. So you never know, we'll get really well acquainted.
Oh, I was excited that I was gonna get to talk about my pets.
Well, Molly's gonna save you. Yeah,
Yeah, sure.
you want to introduce yourself and?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Molly Emmons. I'm the Director of Security and Emergency Management for the district.
And that's a good segue. So Molly has been, so the issue of houselessness in Portland is not a secret. We all know it's a problem and it's being worked through in lots of different ways. And we're seeing impacts of it next to some of our school campuses, some more than others. So we've been hearing for many, many months from parents, from board members, from, the community in general, that on all kinds of different, lots about Cleveland. Cleveland's been a hot topic lately. That's just an example, but we have lots of schools that are, that have houseless camps nearby. So the way that the city has handled it, they have a, and I always forget the acronym, but it's houseless impact reduction, urban impact reduction program. HRCA. Yeah, sounds like pickup, but yeah, I don't know. So the HRCA program lives in the Office of Management and Finance of the city. And they manage the one point of contact system that the city has available. If you see something that you think needs to be cleaned up or there's some issue around it, you call this hotline or you go in and you put in your request. And so we were getting a lot of principals and other staff reaching out to us saying, hey, or reaching out directly to the city. And we were like, whoa, come, let's try to have our own one point of contact, essentially, because this it's not willy-nilly. I don't mean it to sound that way, but it was just not very organized internally and how we were communicating with the city.
And I think one of the important pieces is there's different impacts on different schools. So I know like the French charter school, the entryway was literally blocked, which is different than it's across the street and down the block from Cleveland, right? Like those are two different things. Yeah, and so going through the district means we're prioritizing some of those things.
Yeah, so Molly and I connected to try to figure out how do we just streamline some of this, like can people can Molly take on some of these questions? So that's what happened. Molly always likes to raise her hand.
I call it voluntold.
But we basically said, hey, please use Molly as your first step instead of going to the city so that we can be coordinated and know what the issue is so that we can handle whatever is in our purview. Because there are sometimes things that we can do that don't necessarily fall into the city's line of work. So maybe.
And just to clarify, really, like I'm the internal resource. Yeah. I still push community members to advocate at the city level.
Yes.
Through the one point of contact system, and then also, working through the county as well. So really, I'm trying to support principals, and obviously, I felt a lot of questions and concerns from families, recognizing that this is just a really, really challenging issue, and it's going to take all of us to come up with a solution. It's not, obviously, we know it's not a PPS problem, and so. So, we're just grappling with all kinds of issues. So I meet regularly with my contacts at the city, who I always tell people, I think she probably has the hardest job in the city, honestly. I mean, just, and she's really clear. She's like, we're not really solving the problem right now, that her program is not really solution oriented. It's really about
it's reactive
and displacing people. And they have, they have a pretty high threshold for what it will require to post and clean a camp. They do respond. They have assessment teams that are going out and they're meeting with folks living in these encampments. They're assessing, various things, drug use, crime, health and safety type of, issues. And I think some of the messaging that we want to have as a district is just because somebody's unhoused doesn't mean that they're dangerous. Right. Doesn't mean that they're, they have a right to live in our community. And so we sometimes lose sight of that, I think.
And I think these are our families, right?
Exactly.
So these houseless families are also our families and our students, right? So it's not like us versus the houseless community. It's really about, like at Cleveland, there's a big camp along one of the roads. And I actually think that the one behind the McDonald's is fine. It's now there's some folks that have moved closer to the school and are sleeping where the bus stop is and there's broken
We're
glass. and stuff.
disrupting our work.
Right, so it's like, are kids able to get from the bus stop to school without having to step over someone's legs or walk through broken glass? And that's the piece of like, how do we create those safe avenues for kids to get to school? And it's more like that someone's gonna trip and fall or step on glass, like that, then the houseless people are actually a danger to them, at least from what I've seen at that camp at Cleveland. I haven't been to all the camps, I haven't seen all the sites in Portland, but that's my sense there. But I know that there are other places that it may feel or be less safe.
And the city works really closely with safe routes to schools. So Katie and Janice and I are actually we're on a call every other week just to connect, and we talk about like what are the priority sites that, near schools, how are we creating safe routes? And then, Safe Routes PBOT is a Safe Routes to Schools program. We'll then go in and assess those routes. And sometimes it's just signage, sometimes it's just letting our in-house community know, like, hey, this is a route for students. And it's a level of education along with trying to identify those really unsafe situations, and then how do we work with the city to get them posted and cleaned and displaced. I mean, that's the reality, right?
Right.
It's not possible.
And I think there's that's the sort of short game, right? That's the immediate safety issues, making sure we're being, responsive to our families who have safety concerns. And then there's the education piece and how do we live within this, within what's going on our streets. And then there's the long game. And many of you probably voted for the homeless services measure last year. And that is, I think, that's the next phase. And and a lot of people are saying, well, we just voted for this and there's all this money and why isn't anything happening? And I'm paraphrasing what I've heard from people. So it's a lot of people asking that question. And I think, so I've been in touch with the county joint office folks, and my husband's even doing some work for them. There's so much communication that still needs to happen from that program, because that is going to be, I don't want to say it's going to be a game changer, but it is a lot of money to help people get into service supported housing, not shelters, but housing that's going to help lift them up, get them the services they need if they have, there's all kinds of reasons that people are unhoused. So how do we support them? And so there's a lot of work happening, more, just even a census of these programs know where everybody is, which is amazing. They do these censuses, they go out, they know where people live, they know who they are. There's more work to do because they need more caseworkers, which part of this services measure is going to fund. I would think at some point, and it wasn't for this meeting, but I do think it would be great to have somebody from the joint office give a briefing to the board about what this measure is actually going to do, because I think there is a lot of just lack of information out there about what the plan is. And I mean, trust me, I'm looking at a document, I've been looking at it. There's just so much. The plan, the long-term plan is so long and dense that nobody has time to read that. And I think they're working on that. But I would recommend thinking about whether we want to add that to an agenda in the future, or and I don't know if it would be a full board agenda or this committee, but I'm sure they'd be happy to do that. I also know that in my last conversation with Liam Frost, who's at the county, he's the policy advisor on houselessness for the county chair, that he, was talking about how we should maybe be on some of their Friday calls. I said, yeah, we should. Yeah, we often get forgotten because we're the schools people, not the but it's all, we're serving, these are our families, to your point, Director Lowry. So I think Molly's really helping with the short-term solutions. And then there's sort of this long-term plan for how do we spend these dollars. And they just got released in July. It's only September. So it takes time to spend money, right? And so I do think we're going to start seeing some improvement, but not knowing what is happening can sometimes lead to rumors and disinformation.
So I have two questions. One is, how can we as a board advocate for actual long-term solutions? And I think that Friday call, getting more informed. Mm-hmm. I think we have a unique vantage point where we can speak for kids. And my second, I've heard people say, what if we instituted so far around a school is an encampment free zone? Is that feasible? Is that Because that's.
I don't think that's the
broached me by
solution based on my conversation. So there was an ordinance passed in June and the number doesn't matter, but I can share this with you all. Where they changed, they basically said, we're gonna change that to 150 feet from school zones. And I'm still trying to figure out why they did that.
From a school zone or from a school?
From a school, sorry,
Campus,
school
school
campus,
property.
from the property. And I think the reason they did that was because they
And is
know
that less than it was before?
yes.
Okay.
I don't know, isn't it less? Is it more?
Well, it basically allowed,
Here.
so the hookup program, it basically gave them validity to what they were already doing, right? How they were prioritizing camps. So it really gave them something to lean on to say, this is why, you know, vulnerable population, next to vulnerable population, just as a recipe for a disaster.
Yeah.
So that's all the ordinance really did. It didn't input additional resources or really any additional capabilities. It was just like, this is what we're already doing.
It was the key was deprioritizing low impact. That's the term, low impact camps near ours. Sorry, I had to pull it back up and remind myself in a couple of days since I looked at it. So they were going to deprioritize the removal of low impact encampments that are located at least 150 feet away from high schools or from elementary or public-private elementary or secondary school, other than a high school, and then at least 100 feet away from high school.
What is considered a low impact?
So I have to go back and let me find it. Because that's always the question, right? What's the definition of the thing you're telling us? And I'm gonna see if it's on here, if it's somewhere else. They don't make it easy on, I mean, ordinances are really hard to find and then you can't ever find like.
Right,
history.
right,
So,
well,
yeah, so I will get
It's like,
back
what
to
does this
that.
actually mean?
Okay.
Oh.
But I think what we're hearing is unless there's violence, I mean, there are certain
Yes.
things that have to be, and the city and the county are doing assessments of these camps, and it's their assessment of them as a high impact or a low impact camp that then results in clearances. And just being near a school doesn't make them a priority. It depends on how
Right.
vulnerable.
What else there is. And I can't tell you what a low impact, but I can tell you what high impact is.
Great, tell us what high impact is.
So high impact are encampments that include a combination of factors. Evidence of conspicuous drug use, paraphernalia, or improperly disposed of syringes. Impact on neighborhood livability as measured by the amount of uncontained debris, proximity to school, park, or playground, or private residence. Environmental impact on natural areas and or the presence of hazardous materials. Restriction of access as defined in the ADA, Americans with Disabilities Act standards. Areas that are posted, no trespassing. The size of the camp, verified reports of violence or criminal activity other than camping, blocking public access or restricting maintenance activities. So that's the high impact. So things that are the opposite of that would be
Low impact.
So those are the kinds of things we're thinking about. But I do think it's a multifaceted issue. We all know that. There's the everyday, kids walking over a syringe. We don't want that, right? But we also want our students to feel like they're not in any imminent danger walking past a houseless situation. And that's where there's some balance because everybody has a different comfort level.
And I also think what you said earlier on is just because someone is houseless doesn't mean that they're unsafe.
Yes.
Right?
So we'll continue to, I think it would be great if we pursued a board update on the housing services measure. It's a little, and then there's another group that's working right now called People for Portland that I'm learning more about, which is a different approach. So there's a lot of talk right now about who's doing what and what the focus is. And I think just getting some details about what the services measure is funding and what that long game is will be helpful to the board and to the district.
Do we know what percentage of our students are houseless themselves?
I don't know the newest numbers, but we can get that to you. Yeah, we have last year's. I'll find it.
Because I think there's the encampments near schools, and then as our city faces the housing crisis and the increasing number of houseless folks in our community, I think there's work to do there as we advocate for students and families.
Yes.
Any other questions about this matter, Gary or Herman?
No, I just feel like this is a big issue. I feel like it's a complex issue. But then there's a lot of me that thinks that some of this stuff is simple. I have, it's that the houselessness it's not an issue. That's not my issue. But when you've got multiple reports of stabbing taking place at a houseless camp, to me, whether I'm not saying that everybody is unsafe, if I've got multiple stabbing reports, that's unsafe.
Yeah.
If
That's on the list, that reports of violence.
if I'm walking by and I'm seeing syringes around the school, see, it gets simpler. It
Where's
gets a lot simpler for
Is
me
that
to say,
happening in one of our schools?
yeah,
Which school is, which?
I know
school?
that's happening right now.
Cleveland.
It's happening at Cleveland?
The Roosevelt camp has one on each side on Lombard. It's got one on this side, it's got one over there. And the one on the side by the house, the storage facility has had at least 3 stabbings that I'm aware of.
Right.
At least 3 that I'm personally aware of. And they've had several ODs where they had to come in and give people the Narcan.
Yeah.
So in my mind, this stuff is real simple.
Well, that's high impact. I mean, then that's a high impact
It's like
step that we should be having that
You
conversation.
need to go. That
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
So
You
when
need to
people
go.
are, those
This gets
reports need
simpler.
to come to
True.
Molly then, right? So we
Or
can
the
help
city,
with that.
so the process is, and again, I meet with the city every other week, we talk about like what camps are on our priority list or near school campuses. But the process is they get a report from a community member, the city then sends out Clean and Safe, I believe it's Clean and Safe that goes out and does the assessment of the camp. They have this long list, right? It's like these thresholds, and if a camp meets like 80% or 80 points, then it's at that level is when they just deem it unsafe or that it needs to be posted and cleaned. And so they're getting all of that information. And unfortunately, other than us constantly staying in communication, our jurisdiction is very limited around this. And so,
But is there a way for us to set up a system, like to send out an email to our families and say, if you're seeing things like syringes or you're hearing of stabbings, to help them know how to report those? Because I think oftentimes people don't know how to navigate the system. So whether we're saying, we want you to report those to security services here at PPS so we can document and keep track, or we want you to go straight to the city, I would love for us to help our families because I think they feel disempowered and don't know where to go.
Yeah.
So if we could send out a communication saying, when you hear of a stabbing, when you see a needle, this is how you tell us so that we can, because it's one of those things that if nobody reports it, then it never gets to that threshold of them documenting it and going out and checking.
and there's also we know that it's happening. So Clean and Safe only comes out after there have been several reports that this stuff has happened. So then when they come out and they send their team, they're telling their team not to pick up syringes, but to take pictures of the syringes and then where you put them at, where you saw them at, and then text that picture to this number. The disingenuousness of this, and it's not their fault. Everybody is trying to help. Everybody is trying to do a role. So I don't want to say it with a negative connotation, but the flip side of this reality is that there are other people who don't want the camp to move, don't feel like they need to move. So they're coming out, putting themselves in harm's way, and they're picking up syringes so that other people, it doesn't get called in and then they can stay there.
Yeah.
That's the disingenuousness of it, because now when Clean and Safe comes out, well, I only saw 20 syringes and I need to see 50.
Exactly.
Well, that's because 100 were picked up last night.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
we have to look at all of it, and safety has to be the safety of our kids has to be the number one priority. If kids are walking along this route to get to school, because to simply say it needs to be we're gonna make sure that the bus can stop. What about the people who can't afford to get on the bus? What about the people who are walking because they live too close to get the people? Well, I don't even know if we're doing the bus pass.
Yeah.
So they don't, but they have to walk to school. And so they have to walk back past this, or they have to figure out a longer route to get to school so that they don't go past this. And that's not okay in my world. It's just, they shouldn't have to do that.
And I think because it's not our land and it's 150 is the jurisdiction, I think our role is to help help people report it. Like that's the most impactful thing. I
And
think
we should be
do now.
telling them to bombard them.
Right,
Right,
so I-
bombard them. You should send an email every single time, scream at the top of your lungs, talk to the legislator, talk to your state representative, talk to everybody and let them know that this is absolutely preposterous and that this is unacceptable. We should be telling them to call us so that we get so frustrated that we're sick and tired of it, that we go down and say, y'all gotta do something, because I'm sick of them talking to me. We should really be screaming from the mountaintops.
Yeah,
When
I
it comes to
appreciate
the safety and the well-being
Of our
of
kids.
kids. I'm not saying that, houseless people
Yep.
are bad.
No,
That's not what this is. But we have to, when I look at it, I have to look at when I prioritize it, I'm prioritizing the safety of the kids because that's my responsibility.
Right, as a
It's
board.
not my responsibility to figure out houselessness. My responsibility is to make sure that the students and the families that we serve have access to a rigorous,
Joyful. Well-rounded experience, yeah. Okay, so I'd like us to look at, I mean, again, as a board member, I can't direct staff to do anything, but I'd like us to think about how could we help support our families to report these things, or our students to, like our high school students, to help report some of the things they're encountering that they're concerned about. So let's think about that and come back at our next meeting with maybe an idea about how we can help with that. Gary?
It's not just about reporting, it's how you report it as well. That's what I found, right? You can't just say it feels unsafe. You have to be able to articulate and give like photo evidence.
Yep.
Yeah.
Because, safety means some different
Yeah.
things to different
To
people.
everyone,
And so it's also, I work with families on this is how you should report. And
Right.
these are some of the kind of buzzwords to use.
Good.
Um,
So if we can
And
provide a
it's
resource like
just-
that to all of our,
yeah, yeah.
Gary?
So what are some of the things that we can do that in our jurisdiction?
So if we have any houseless folks that are trying to set up camps on district property, we can utilize our security staff. We immediately go out and remove the camps or ask them to move on. We can also issue like a trespasses if it's like a frequent flyer that comes back onto our campuses. So, and most of our houseless community, they know, right? They know where they can and cannot set up camps. So we don't often really encounter, it might just be a one-off where we see tents coming on our property, and we address that immediately because we don't want them to get rooted. And then really it's the relationships with our partners at the city and county. And I also think I've been talking with Katie Lindsay at the city about what sort of educational program can we push out to our students and families about living with our unhoused community, right? Like how to, some of it's just when the unknown is scary and just trying to send that message that it doesn't necessarily, mean that you're dangerous just because you're houseless. And so when we all have a little bit more bandwidth, that's some of the things that we're thinking about. Like, can we do some PSAs to families? Can we talk to students about how to live safely with each other? So trying to take kind of a proactive approach to it as well.
Well, and I think within that too, how to live safely with each other, and when you're seeing syringes,
Yep.
when there's
Here's what you do.
stabbing,
Yep.
here's how you report that.
Yep, exactly.
And if
Yeah.
we do a briefing with the services folks, we can also you should ask them that question, because I think that everybody wants to work together on how we figure this out, and we're part of that. We're a big system, and we're all serving the same people.
Did you have other questions, Gary?
No, thank you.
But I do think, Herman, I think what you said about our priority has to be our students and their safety. And if we do have camps nearby where drug use is happening, stabbings are happening, that it's hitting these high impact, then we need to be reporting that and advocating for our students' safety. And the issue is for us, like we can't, the Cleveland, I have the most familiarity with the Cleveland camp because the camp is actually where I used to come park to drop my daughter off and pick her up from school, but we don't go there now because it's just full of RVs and stuff, and it's hard to get down, and there's lots of people, and so we've gone to a different place. But yeah, I didn't know that when school first started. So when I was first parking there, it's like we don't have any jurisdiction because it's across the street from the campus. It's not our property, so PPS there's nothing we can actually do because it's not our property, but it does impact our students and how they walk to the field. And so the kids are going a different route to the field. They can walk around a different way. But then the question comes is like, part of the camp seems to be pretty established and pretty chill. And then part of the camp seems to be a little more rowdy and a little more high impact. And so it's that piece too of like, how do we, and things change, right? Camps change, the people who live in that housing development change. And so how do we as a community respond to keep our kids safe? And it's a challenging, but I think having some tools to help people know what to do when they do experience a problem would be really helpful.
And those information around what's high impact, what it looks like, can we share that so that people know it's like, just because you see a houseless camp doesn't mean that we have a problem. It has to meet. We're not saying move the camp simply because it's camp, because that's not okay.
Right, we're saying move it because it's dangerous.
Sort of a
Yeah, I think we
threshold.
can-
Yeah, there has to be a threshold where before it can become an issue. Like, there's no reason to start calling in complaints and doing all that if it's not doing these things. Just because they're there, that's not our issue.
That's just low tolerance.
And everybody's, exactly, everybody's tolerance and threshold is different. And
Right,
part
some
of
people
it-
see it immediately start screaming, but that can't be us.
No,
Right.
no, that's not us. But,
That
and that's
can't
part
be
of what
us.
the city is grappling with is trying to weed through all of those, because I can only imagine how many reports they get a day. And then trying to weed through all those reports
And
send out,
prioritize.
prioritize their assessment teams, go out, assess the camps. And then they have to post a camp, allow 48 hours for the folks to move. And then they go back in and repost it and give them another 48 hours before they'll actually go in and do a cleanup. So, obviously wanting to give people a chance to find a new place to relocate. So it's, and then the resources are different, through, they did have some support through Portland Police Bureau to help with some of the social workers going into the camps. They don't have that as a resource anymore. So, they're also trying to address their own kind of safety issues going into the camp. So yeah, we all know it's just very complex.
But I think that's why a resource for families might be good to help them
Yeah.
navigate when is it low impact, when is it not, when is it just,
And
we can
it's
plug
I think we're all in the
education.
same place.
It's educating them
Yeah.
on, this is acceptable, this is not. And let's not make something a problem. That's not a problem, just for the sake of doing something, because that's unhealthy for all of us.
Yeah, and you're wasting energy on certain levels.
Yes, you are.
And we also, if it's a camp of families or something, we don't want to destabilize our students.
And we see the disparities in reporting, right? I mean, we see what communities report and what
Which
communities
communities
don't report. So we see that in trying to address those issues.
Well, speaking of our relationship with our partners, we're going to move on now to our outdoor tent permit process. And I know that some people around this table would like us to ask for forgiveness rather than permission.
Yeah, that's me.
Yeah.
In that boat.
Yeah, you're like, let's just put up tents, and if the city yells at us, then they yell at us.
That's me.
Especially today, given the rain. I know that there's a lot of interest in continuing to keep our students eating outdoors as part of COVID safety protocols. And that there's a definite request. I've gotten tons of emails about tents from parents, and parents wanting to buy tents and parents wanting to put tents up, and tents are like a hot topic. So how can we get tents? What are the steps? How can we advocate for the permits if that's what's holding us up? So let's talk tents.
Tent time.
So I brought my good friend Dana.
Dana.
She's intense.
She's intense. Is that what you just said? Oh, bad puns.
We wanted to have Dana here because she knows a little more about what the permitting process would look like because it's my understanding, and please take the reins here, but it's my understanding that we have at a certain level, at a certain size, we have to be permitted.
Yeah, it's a fire code issue because at a certain size, then you have a certain number of people in there. And if you have any kind of walls that pull down, for rain and that kind of exiting, you've got to be a certain amount away from the buildings, all that kind of stuff. So I know that we're looking at how big can we go, like how many square feet can we go without doing a permit and how many kids does that get us? So is this could we do 2 on one site? You know, I mean, is there a way to wiggle through this a little bit? So, I know Dan's been working on that. I don't know more than that. I don't know that they've ordered any yet. I don't know that. I can find out, but I'm not sure if they've actually bought it yet.
Do we know how many schools we're talking about that don't have covered? Areas?
There's only about 30 of our schools that have covered play areas, so we have 100 schools.
It's like 70.
Yeah, the high schools are a little different because the kids can go, they're open campuses, so I don't know what the demand is at the high school level, but certainly for the littles and the other schools.
There's more, yeah.
Yeah.
So again, our role on this intergovernmental committee as elected officials is to advocate. So
Okay.
who can we call and yell at the fire bureau?
Oh,
Don't fire, we want to talk to the permitting side,
okay.
right?
So it is generally a fire marshal issue, so that's the fire department.
Yeah, they're not gonna
And-
care if we call and tell
and-
them.
You know, our lovely esteemed Lincoln High School alum is the fire chief,
Oh, there you go.
and she likes to help schools, and we have not
Okay,
reached out to the fire department yet on this, but we can. If I just wanna know, cause you know, before we call, we wanna know like what's
What's our
the
ask
right?
exactly?
right, that's what I'd like us to work on, is to be really
Yeah.
specific in our ask, and I think if we're saying the reason we can't do this is because of permitting, then I want us to
Is
really
there-
look at that.
Right, we
Is
should
there,
exhaust that.
is there a way to reach a
Expedite that
compromise or
process,
ask questions, or, because it's
Or get a
temporary and
permit,
because there's a pandemic and public health, like, are there spaces where we could, you know, make this work for our kids? That's what I'd really like us to see. And then, like you said, Courtney, since we have a relationship with the fire chief to say, what will it take? What do we need to do?
I think as far as like permitting goes, the reason that you have to have it is because of fire and safety issues.
Right.
The actual permit goes through the permitting office. And so their reasoning behind it is, once you get a certain size, there's a safety issue and, you know, you gotta do certain things, but the person that you're gonna, or the office that you're gonna get the permit from is not the fire chief.
Right,
That's
you're
the-
absolutely right.
Right, but
That's the fire.
You're right.
I mean, so
The permitting
permitting,
folks are probably,
and they have
Yeah.
specs that says this feet by this feet is
think where
a
the-
permit.
I think where the fire chief comes in is if the street level bureaucrat says, nope, can't do it, doesn't fit. Where we say, this is a pandemic, we have students we want to keep in school, this is a way that we can, you know, eating outside is a great way to mitigate risk, blah, 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 and then we say, you know, I don't love calling the top until we have to,
Right.
right?
Oh, yeah.
You know, we don't wanna call, I don't like to call the
I-
mayor's office until we have
I'd rather call it top from jump.
Day one,
Yeah.
Yeah, from day one.
day
And that's what
one.
I was thinking, maybe we can get one of the commissioners, or whoever the commissioner is over permitting,
Yeah,
or something, maybe offer some kind of waiver
yeah,
for this time
Yes.
period, temporary waiver, saying, hey, you know, we're gonna issue a temporary waiver for our school district so that we
Yep.
can make sure our kids ain't sitting outside in the rain.
yeah, I think that's a great
But
suggestion.
I always believe going to the top person first, especially if you have that access and that
Yeah.
ability to call them.
And we as board members can do that.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
that's how you can utilize
Yes,
us,
exactly.
to say, Kate Herman, I need you to call the fire
Yeah.
chief and, you know, get us this.
Yeah, I
or
mean,
get
that's-
this, call
that's
the
a great
commissioner.
reason that we have all of you.
And that's why we
here.
have this intergovernmental committee, so we can strategize that stuff and say, like, this is what we need to get done with our partners for our students.
And I
So
think
how can we do that?
the question right now is, what is the ask? So
Right.
do we know that it's a problem already, or are we just expecting that it could be? Like what, you know,
I think that's a good question. I don't know the answer.
and it's good to prepare, right? It's good to know, like, what are we talking, if we did this, is this going to get some pushback, or we just do it?
Plan for the worst, hope for the
Yeah.
best, but I figured, oops, it worked for my kids for years.
Other parenting secrets?
The big wide eye. What?
So we can.
We'll
talk-
coordinate
Yeah,
on
we'll
that.
talk about it, and we'll talk about what we
What-
need.
Yeah, what's the
people to
ask
help
first?
us.
Yeah.
Well, I'm very interested to see what our schools did today for lunch, because today was the first day that there was rain during the school day, right? And so there was rain during what was lunch hour for some of our schools, so did kids end up eating inside
Yeah.
today?
I can tell you what happened at lunch school and lunch duty today.
Oh yeah, tell us what happened at lunch duty today, Karen.
first lunch, they had the kindergartners were in the cafeteria all 6 feet apart at their tables, and then the first graders ate every other dot, so also 6 feet for the most part, in the hallways on either side. And then we all just kind of stood and made sure they stayed in their spot, and then made sure they put their mask on and go put their stuff in the garbage. And then the second lunch, it wasn't raining anymore, so we wiped down the tables, but the tarps were still kind of wet, so they had second grade in the cafeteria, same thing, spread out 6 feet, and then the third grade was outside. So, and with their regular 3 feet.
So they are actually using 6 feet.
Inside.
Inside.
3 feet
Yeah,
outside.
just lining up in the hallway.
And so when you say lined up out in the hallway, are they sitting on the floor?
Yeah. Yeah,
We gave money to each school, right, to get like a mat or a stool or whatever would work for them, individually, so that they were sitting on the grass,
Or the hall.
Or the hallway floor, or gym floor, or whatever.
But it sounds like they were
But I
just
don't
sitting
know
on the
if they
floor
all-
today.
Yes.
inside they were, I think they were hoping to start raining.
Yeah.
They bought, I know, this is the one school, right, they bought picnic tables and tarps.
For outside.
So tarps out for kids who want to kind of communally, but still spread out, and then picnic tables.
So each school got money to figure out what they needed to be successful at lunchtime.
Yes.
And that was different depending on the
Every
student
school is
population
different.
and the,
Right, yeah,
resources
and what their
they have.
campus is like,
Yeah.
and resources. All that sort of stuff. But yeah, they do have some funding for, so they're not sitting.
except,
Well, I mean,
Well,
that's.
in this.
well, that was the
Yeah.
choice this
Right.
school
Yeah, they're
made.
sitting on the
That's the
floor.
choice this school
They're
made.
sitting on the floor, but I'd rather for them to sit on the floor than just getting,
Right.
Right.
It is what it is.
Yeah.
And-
But I do think like the question about tents is one that like,
Right.
because it's starting to get rainy, like the sooner we move on this, the better.
Right.
I would like to see some urgency on
Yeah.
what we as board members can do to help advocate for permits or, like, again, if the plan by operations is to use tents, then use us to help make that happen.
Yeah.
Right.
That's what I'm trying to say.
And let us also know who's the commissioner who's over
Well,
there.
and I think that's the question,
I
is
can
Is it-
find that out.
permitting at the, who permits for the fire marshal?
And again, I want to make sure it's
It's
something,
probably the same.
Yeah, I assume so.
but are
Yeah,
we
I mean-
gonna need, that's the question is if you guys figure out a way that we can have 2 smaller tents, so we don't need a permit, and let's not waste our political capital on this, but if we do need it, the sooner we know that, the quicker we can start advocating so we can get this done.
And just,
So that's
and
the
we would
question.
just need to know, this is what the ask is.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, definitely, no, we
And
won't.
then that way, when we go to talk with different ones,
Yeah.
we know exactly what we're asking for, what we need, why we need it. And then we're able to leverage our relationships and these different things to make something happen.
Hey, Chief Martinek, do you know what percentage of our students are houseless?
Are houseless?
Yeah,
I don't right off the
Oh,
top of my
Leslie.
yeah,
head.
I just was, I
Oh,
thought it
it's-
might be something you would have memorized, but I'm not.
Yeah, I wanna say it's right around 5%, maybe
Okay.
5 to 8%.
Yeah,
but-
that's what I was looking ballpark.
Yeah, we can ask Leslie Odell.
That's fine. I just was curious at a ballpark figure.
Yeah.
Okay, so are we clear on tents? Like,
Yes, ma'am.
you guys figure out if you need it. You
We
figure
are
out what you
intense
need.
about
We are.
And then we are ready to fight for tents,
Yeah.
to talk to the fire marshal, to talk to the commissioners. Use us to help make the tents happen.
Perfect.
Yeah.
We are hearing it from our community. We want to support staff and operations in this work. And if that's a barrier, let us use our political capital.
And
to
let them
make
help
that
us,
happen.
right? This is
Yeah.
an easy win.
Oh,
in my
yeah.
opinion.
Oh, man.
Right, yeah.
Oh, we're gonna let kids eat outside because we helped move this forward.
Yeah, we
And-
want to keep the
Great.
kids safe.
And this is
And for
bonus
election
season.
time?
Yeah, this is
Yeah.
bonus season. Who don't want a W right now?
A lot of people have kids in our school.
Who don't want a W?
Yeah.
We can
So that's what we-
take photo ops if you want. So-
This is my goal for the intergovernmental committee this year, is to say, what is a barrier for our strategy? And how can we as board members, as elected officials who move in some of these circles, use our political capital to further the aims of the district? Like that's, that's what we want to do.
on our list?
Yeah.
Start on it.
Yes, seriously.
Yesterday,
Start on
Let me know, Brenda, and we'll get it on the agenda, right?
yeah.
Make the list prioritized, and then we'll just start going down.
Yeah.
We got 4 years to change the world.
You know, and people come around and ask us us for their endorsements, you know, like for elections. So we've got, I mean,
We
we've
got
got
4 years to change the world.
we've got a little bit, so let us use it for the district, right? Like, that's why we're here, to serve the district. So let us do that. Let us be your partners in that work, because we can take the hit rather than staff taking the hit whenever we can. Okay, anything else about tents? We all want tents. Okay. The next item on our agenda, advocacy for asymptomatic screening, we don't need to worry about because it's happening. The timeline got moved up. You all got that email, I think, from
I love it when
Jonathan.
things just take care of themselves, which isn't true, because you guys know we're.
We worked really, really hard on that, but again,
It's not-
We just.
if you need board members to call OHSU and say, this is a, you know, have us call.
Could Brenda just share where we are?
Yes,
I'm happy to do so. So actually just got off a call with OHSU. What we're doing is we have gotten all the information from OHSU. We have aligned courier routes for schools. We're sending out the information with the opt-in forms for parents, the consent forms. This week, they actually went to Fabian today, so they should be going out today. Yay.
Nice.
Exactly.
In my kid's backpack at the end of the day.
I know, it should be. Text me if it's not.
Okay, I'm going to.
And so then we'll be rolling it out to all of our K5s and K8s this week. It takes a couple days after we get the consent form to actually double check the name with our SSID number for all the students in K5s and K8s with our staff in our buildings to make sure that we have all the information. So that will take us Monday and Tuesday and probably half day of Wednesday. And then on Wednesday afternoon, we do a data dump to OHSU. That's gonna happen every week for the next 3 weeks because we'll do K5, K8s, and then that following week we do a data dump. Then we're doing middle school, high school, and MPGs. And then that following Wednesday, we do a data dump. And then we're continuing for the next couple of weeks to do any stragglers. So anybody can sign up at any time. And that's the timeline and the process. Once OHSU, so we will do a data dump to OHSU next Wednesday. It says OHSU, they're giving themselves 10 days because what they have to do is they then have to create a my chart for OHSU for each individual student. They have to confirm the email address so that parents have to then, you know, do something else with my chart. And then they also have to pull all of our data into labels and label every single vial.
Right.
And then they will give them to us.
So when do we think K8 testing will start?
So K5, K8 testing, we're hopeful, I have to look at the calendar.
Yeah.
If all the world is right, right?
The printer doesn't jam, the email
All the
doesn't get
stars
hacked.
are
Exactly.
every one of them.
So I just want to keep that as a caveat.
Right, absolutely.
So if all is right with the world, we will give the data dump, our first data dump on September 29th.
Mhm.
They then want 10 days to be able to process that and get us our first batch.
So it'd be October
That would be
9th.
October 8th or 9th. So my guess is we would have the first collection start the week of October 11th for our K5s and K8s. They are hoping, as they get used to this process, they're hoping to speed up that time. So my guess is the first one won't happen until the week of October 11th. I think that they will create efficiencies in their process. And so then by middle school, our MPGs, charters, and our high schools will be able to get those back in a quick fashion.
Great.
And so that's it.
That's great. That's way better than
Fantastic.
6 weeks.
That's fantastic.
Thank you, Dana and Brenda and whole team for your work on all that.
That's fantastic.
Thank you.
So can I just ask, so like any kiddo will just randomly test kids? Like how's it gonna
The
work?
parent has to opt in.
Right, so
Yep,
let's
so-
say I've
okay.
opted my child in, so
Okay.
they'll get tested randomly on occasion?
Happy to walk through the process.
Yeah, please.
So each school will have an identified date that they are going to give out the test kits. So Courtney has a child at Hobby. So Courtney, the mom, is going to get her test on Tuesday, October 12th. It'll come home in her child's backpack. On Wednesday, October 13th, in the morning, before the child eats breakfast, the child's gonna sit into the little test kit. There's directions.
I just see my kindergartner sitting into this is gonna be great. Okay, continue. Yeah. This is why we're doing it at home, not at school.
And so on Wednesday, then Courtney's going to do that with her child. She is then going to put it in the child's backpack.
It's sealed.
It's all sealed. It has all the washed. We asked OHSU to make sure that all the directions and all of our are in all of our supported languages as well.
Great.
So we have that. We have some visuals for families who may not understand any.
I always need the visual directions.
Exactly, and we do have a number of families who don't read and write as well as the directions.
I put all my kids' toys together by the pictures. I have no idea what those instructions say.
Yeah. All of our brains work differently, right? Some
Yeah.
people really like read something and others of us are more visual.
So
and
we-
Well, if
great.
you want them to opt in and if that's a barrier, then.
We've got lots of ways to help them
So
be
we
successful.
always
Yeah.
have a number of different ways families can call in and get support. We can help translate the directions. We can do a lot of things.
So is it like Courtney's kid will be randomly selected?
So if she signs up, she is getting it every Tuesday. So
Wow.
then,
That's awesome.
So
it's
Wednesday
consistent
morning-
Tuesday.
so Wednesday morning, she sends her child with their spit kit, their sealed spit kit.
Say that very carefully. Yes.
Into school. We are allowing principals to decide where those collection bins will be. Are they just going to their classroom? For elementary kids, that kind of makes sense. And then they just put them in a little tub. And then the principal or whoever comes by, grabs them all, puts them in the cooler with the ice pack. We
Ready
put
for the courier.
And then we wait for the courier. The courier then comes on that Wednesday, and that is their date. That is the same process for every Tuesday, Wednesday from there forward. So Wednesday, the courier picks it up, takes it to OHSU. OHSU then processes all of the vials. They then upload the information into the child's MyChart, the OHSU MyChart. If it is a positive case, they will also then notify the parent. And so then what we have instructed our parents to do is to then, what is the expectation that we are asking our parents is that if it's a positive case, they then call the school
Immediately.
Does
immediately.
the family doesn't know the result if it's not positive?
It's in the
Yes.
My Chart.
Oh, right, it's in there, sorry.
But
yeah.
the family won't be called for a
Right.
negative.
They
They're
won't be
only
called
called
for
for
everything.
positive.
They're only called if it's positive.
Does the school get information as well?
No,
Because of
Not
HIPAA,
yet.
right?
so OHSU is not allowed to provide us the medical information. What will happen is OHSU then sends every day a list to the county, I believe. And then the county will make sure that they are contacting the school district. So what we're hoping for, and this is the plan, although I just want to make sure all the stars are aligned again, is that the county will have enough people and enough bandwidth to be able to then immediately have that and then either make a call to us or an email or something like that. We're still working out the final pieces of that. It did go back and forth between whether it's OHA, whether it's MESD, whether it's the county, who's going to contact us. We do believe that we've all settled on that it is Multnomah County. And so I have been working with Alexander Lowell with the county health department to finalize that process. Who will be the contact person? Because I don't want that. I would rather streamline it and them just give us all the names of the students in one one lump time, and then we can take it and sort it out by school.
Because at some point, we will get a list of those kids.
Yes, we will. It's just OHSU will not contact us directly.
Gotcha.
So will it be Tuesday for every school, or Tuesday's just the example for Bobby? And
That's
it
just an
might be
example for Fabian.
Wednesday at Cleveland.
But whatever it is, it's the same every.
Same day.
It is the same process every single
So
week.
all kids who opt in, be tested every week. Same thing. And do we know for how long? If this, do we say this is 6 months, or this is indefinite until things
It's-
change?
So OHA is the one that is the one that received this money through the federal government. And they contracted for us, for our region, we're region 1, it was OHSU that got the contract. And so it's their program. We are just the host.
Okay,
So this isn't a PPS program.
right, it's an OHSU,
It's
and
an
OHA.
OHSU program. We are simply
Which
the
goes in
very
alignment
friendly,
with
accommodating
But we
host.
say, we are not public health experts.
We are not
We're
public
not.
health experts.
We are not public health experts.
But I think what's really lovely is that this will allow us to help, it'll help us stop spread, because if we know that there's a student who's positive, or our staff also, or is this just student testing?
So there's 3 ways that we test. So one is with our employees, if they aren't fully vaccinated,
They're
then they
testing.
sign up for those home kits
Yeah.
that they get at their home every week, and then they have to test weekly. So that's the one. The second way is our symptomatic testing, which is in all of our schools, and it's in our symptom spaces. And so if a student or a staff feels signs or symptoms of being sick during the day, they go to the symptom space, they get a rapid test, and we should know within 20 minutes to 30 minutes. In all cases though, because they're showing some signs or symptoms of illness,
Right,
they report home.
yeah, that makes sense.
And then the third way is our asymptomatic test, our
Which is just
screening
students.
testing. And that's PCR. Yes, our screening testing.
The screening test, PCR test. Oh, they're the not rapid ones, the opposite of rapid.
Yes.
Yeah, well, and this is, the
Oh, yeah.
asymptomatic is just students, right, not staff?
Right, yes, the screening testing, which is for asymptomatic, is only for students.
Right.
That's all the grant
But
was
it's still
for.
gonna make a huge difference, I think, as far as like, if we find someone who is positive, even if they're asymptomatic, that will help us reduce the
Yes.
potentials. I mean, it's one more layer in our mitigation strategy, and I'm so thankful for your work to help make this happen so quickly.
I know, quick question. So what's that time frame from the time that OHSU sees that somebody is positive? What's that time frame from there to the classroom? Or to
Right,
PPS?
so once OHSU has the test, they are supposed to process all of them within 24 to 48 hours. So there could be some lag of time that a positive student would come to school that next day. They're really focused on 24 hours so that it would give that parent that next day notification, and then they would be instructed to quarantine their child.
But what's the time from when we find out? And I believe all parents are honest.
So they would call us right away,
I believe that they're gonna call us immediately.
then we would know in
And
24
we
to
would
48
know.
hours.
But let's say the stars didn't align from that day. And the phone was out,
Yes,
their internet was down.
yes, and
They have no service.
They lost the PPS. Yeah.
Yeah.
And there are no phone booths anywhere around
No.
anywhere.
There's absolutely no way they can
Don't
contact us.
directly use it.
If that happens and we are not immediately notified by the parent who gets that information, then that's the process we're continuing to hammer out, is what is the timeline for the county to contact us? We're hoping that it's the same timeline. So as the parents are getting it from OHSU, we're getting it within a couple hours from them, from the county.
Great.
We're still working on that process.
Is that what we're asking them for, or is that just something we're waiting to hear how they want to do it?
We have been in joint conversation about that. And so we just, the county and OHA and OHSU had to, just problem solve some technicality stuff about health and medical stuff that we don't want to get into. And then as soon as they did that, It has been decided that it's the county, and now Alex and I have been on email chats back and forth, just working on the final pieces and the timeline.
I will report that going back to our 10th conversation, Cleveland High School students ate outside.
Awesome.
I texted my Cleveland High School student. He's in class answering text messages. So
We won't even talk about that right now.
It's teleclassing time. Teleclassing time. She answered it, right?
Is that the same process is that gonna be the same process for high school as well?
Yes, same process. Yep, for every student. And so we have had a couple questions about what if a parent signs up and then decides not to test every week. That's fine. They don't have to do the test kit every week. At some point in time, though, we will ask them to opt back out because that's a waste of a resource because it's labeled with that child's name. They're gonna get it. They're gonna continue to get it. And we're wasting resources. So at some point in time, we'll say, if you're not gonna continue with this program, we need you to opt out so that we can give this resource to another school district. So.
Was there a reason why we're not doing it at the schools? Is it, did they have the capacity?
Well,
on top of OHSU and them, did they not have the capacity to come and do it at the schools?
Yeah, they do.
Okay.
92 schools.
I'm just thinking about teachers having kids spit into tubes and.
Well, no, I ain't talking about the teachers doing it. I'm talking about,
Right.
because
Oh,
some,
it's just you comment, yeah.
because
that
some
would make
private high
sense.
schools, they actually do it at the high school.
Right, that would.
That's
make
what I'm
sense.
trying to figure out,
Yeah, it's also a lot on the principals who already have so much. going on.
But, so that makes sense that it's an OHSU capacity issue, but that would be good if we could have medical professionals come do it ourselves.
Yeah. No.
No, I was just thinking the poor kindergarten teacher,
I know.
trying to get all those kids to spit into tubes, yeah.
So what
That's what I envisioned,
Yeah.
but
what we're trying to do is limit the spread.
yeah.
And so if then we're asking kids to take off their masks and to
cool.
spit.
That's true.
I mean, it doesn't matter where we're doing that. We're doing it in a school building and the
And they
aerosol
gonna get it
spreads.
with everything, cause they,
Yes.
Oh,
that's terrible, that's
Well, and yeah, okay.
So we said right from the very beginning that if parents are choosing to enroll, then it really is a parent responsibility. Because we're trying to keep students as safe as possible within the school building.
All right, we don't have any public comment today, it looks like. I just checked in with Kara, so we've got 6 more minutes. Are there any other questions or any?
I was gonna offer one other
Yeah,
update since we're just
please.
talking about kids and COVID. And it's not technically intergovernmental, but it kind of is.
Yeah.
We're working with Kaiser Permanente in coordination with medical teams international to start thinking and planning for when that 5 to 11-year-old vaccine is available, which should be. I mean, I have a 6-year-old, like, let's just get this show on the road, but but I think, everybody's antsy. And so how do we as a school system support vaccinating younger kids? So we're working with them to try to map it out. We've got a plan to pilot 8 locations first, just because if you try to do all of it, it never goes well, right? Do a little bit at a time. So we are nothing like big to report yet because we haven't rolled it out. We don't know when it's going to be available, but it's coming and it might be around Halloween or right after.
they're saying by the end of October.
Yeah. So
That,
I mean,
it's going to be available. That's what I've been watching.
I think we'll see what the date is. I mean, I hope.
Yeah.
It might slip into November, one person said, but it's just a matter of you approve it, how long does it take to get the vaccines? Because they're different doses to pediatricians and to doctors,
Yeah.
providers. So it's exciting. And so we're gonna look at our 7 CSI title schools first, plus Fabian, because Kaiser asked to do it at Fabian since they have a long
Well, they have the
relationship
space.
with the school.
Yeah.
We have a
And it's a big school, which is exciting. You can get a lot of, hopefully we can get a lot of kids vaccinated quickly. But just wanted to let you know that we're working on that. And I imagine it's not, this is gonna take a village. It's not just gonna be Kaiser. I'm gonna try to talk to OHS and speak about it as well, but.
Can we do it in our school-based health centers as well?
They're already doing COVID vaccines, but the pediatric one, I don't know yet, but yeah, I'll talk to Alexander. I'm sure they want to.
I'm sure.
Because we know that those are just in high school, but that doesn't mean they're just serving high school students. So,
Right.
and I think after talking to the governor's office and their health policy folks are thinking through this as well, but it's not gonna be set up an OCC for kids. It's gonna be at the pediatrician, pharmacy, and probably school level. Although we haven't been asked to do it, we think it's important to offer it.
Director Lowry.
Is that?
I had a question, Courtney. Is that after the FDA gives approval, or are you planning to do it prior to final approval?
Prior to final approval, but after obviously EUA, emergency use approval.
And I forget, did the legislature provide a liability waiver for vaccines administration or mandates prior to full FDA approval?
I don't believe they did.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tricky one, just like with the adult version, because some people will just not do
12
it
plus.
until then. Yeah, sorry, 12 plus.
Yeah. Well, no, adult version and then 12,
Yeah.
we've done 12
Well,
plus
so,
clinics,
yeah,
right?
and we know that 12 to 15 are not yet biologically authorized or full approval.
Right, they're still
16 and up
EUA,
are.
yeah.
So it gets sticky. We can't mandate anything for these young kids if there's no vaccine to mandate. It's not
Right.
out yet. Then it comes out under an emergency use authorization because it won't be ready for prime time for FDA full approval yet because they won't have gone through those motions.
Right,
But we offered vaccines at school sites before full approval by the FDA, so I don't imagine that would impact this. And again, parents are gonna do what they're gonna do, and some might wait for full approval and some might just wait a little longer to see that it's,
or as like
good.
the families at my church are like, we're first in line.
Oh, I mean, to Bobby and I'll be
Yeah,
second in line, no, I mean, obviously I also wanna make sure we're focused on the right school populations, and so that's why we're focused on those 8 schools first.
Great.
More to come.
okay, anything else? Any other questions? All right, this meeting is adjourned.
Awesome.
Yay.
Good job. Well, that was fun.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Brenda, for coming upstairs for an in-person